There's a reason why so many people are drawn to the law of attraction, and it's not really about money, success, or even relationships. Not at first. At its core, it speaks to something deeper. That quiet feeling most people carry, but rarely admit out loud. The feeling that life could be more, that something is missing, that you were meant for a different version of reality, but somehow you keep waking up to the same patterns, the same thoughts, the same outcomes. That's where the law of attraction becomes powerful. Not because it promises magic, but because it gives people hope that change is possible. The problem is, most people are introduced to it in the most shallow way imaginable. They hear things like, just think positive, or visualize what you want, and they treat it like a quick fix. Like repeating a few affirmations in the morning is enough to rewrite years of conditioning, doubt, and fear. And when nothing changes, they assume it doesn't work. But what if the issue was never the idea itself and only the way it was simplified? Because real change doesn't begin when you casually want something. It begins when what you want starts to take up real space in your mind. When it stops being a distant wish and starts becoming part of how you see yourself. Your thoughts aren't just random noise. They shape your perception, your emotional state, and ultimately your decisions. And your decisions, repeated over time, quietly build your life. So before asking if the law of attraction works, there's a more honest question you need to face. What have you been consistently feeding your mind every single day? Most people think the law of attraction is about getting what you want, but that's not entirely true. It's actually about becoming someone who can recognize, accept, and act on what you say you want. And that's where most people fail. Not because they don't desire change, but because they haven't changed the internal patterns that keep producing the same life. You can say you want success, but if deep down you believe you're not capable, your mind will filter out opportunities that don't match that belief. You can say you want peace, but if your internal dialogue is constantly negative, your body will remain in a state of tension, even when things are going well. This is why nothing seems to shift. Not because the world is against you, but because your perception is trained to confirm what you already believe. Your brain is constantly scanning for evidence. It's trying to make your reality consistent with your identity. So if your identity is built around limitation, fear, or self-doubt, you will unconsciously recreate situations that reinforce that story. Not intentionally, not consciously, but consistently. And this is the part no one talks about. The law of attraction isn't just about thinking differently. It's about interrupting patterns that have been running your life for years. Patterns you didn't even choose consciously. Thoughts that became automatic. Reactions that became habits. Beliefs that became invisible. So when people say it doesn't work, what they often mean is, I tried to think differently, but I didn't become different. And that difference changes everything. If you really want to understand why the law of attraction feels real for some people and completely useless for others, you have to look at something deeper than motivation. You have to look at how the mind is wired, because your brain is not designed to make you successful. It's designed to keep you safe, and safety most of the time means staying the same. Every thought you repeat creates a pathway. The more you think it, the easier it becomes. Over time, those thoughts stop feeling like thoughts and start feeling like truth. That's how beliefs are formed, not from a single moment, but from repetition. Quiet, consistent repetition. So if, for years, you've been telling yourself that things are hard, that you're not ready, that life doesn't work in your favor, your brain doesn't question it. It accepts it, it builds around it, it protects it, even if that belief is limiting you. This is why change feels uncomfortable. Not because something is wrong, but because your brain interprets new ways of thinking as a threat. When you start imagining a different life, a better version of yourself, your mind doesn't immediately celebrate it. It resists it. It pulls you back to what's familiar. And that's the hidden conflict most people never realize they're living in. They say they want a new life, but their mind is still attached to the old one. So when people talk about the law of attraction, what they're really touching on, without fully understanding it, is the idea that your internal world is constantly shaping your external one, but not in a magical way, in a psychological, consistent, and deeply human way. At some point, you have to stop looking at the law of attraction as something external and start seeing it as something deeply internal. Because what truly changes your life is not what you imagine for a few minutes a day. It's what you consistently embody without even realizing it. Your thoughts influence your emotions. Your emotions influence your state. And your state influences how you act, what you tolerate, what you pursue, and what you avoid. This is where everything starts to connect, because your actions are not random. They are the natural extension of how you see yourself. If you see yourself as someone who always struggles, you will hesitate, overthink, and miss opportunities that require confidence. If you see yourself as someone who is evolving, even slowly, you will start taking small actions that align with that identity. And those small actions, repeated over time, create results that seem almost unexpected. But they're not. They are simply the consequence of a shift that started internally. This is why two people can have access to the same opportunities and walk away with completely different outcomes. One sees possibility, the other sees risk. One moves forward, the other stays still. And over time, that difference compounds. Not because one is luckier, but because one is operating from a different internal reality. So when people say, "The law of attraction changed my life," what they often mean, without realizing it, is that they changed how they see themselves. And once that shifts, behavior follows. And once behavior changes, results become inevitable. Not instantly, not magically, but consistently. Let's make this real for a second. Imagine someone who wakes up every day already expecting things to go wrong. Not in an obvious way, but in subtle thoughts. This is going to be stressful. I'm probably not ready for this. Things never really work out for me. These thoughts don't feel dramatic. They feel normal, familiar, almost automatic. But here's what's actually happening. That person walks into their day already in a defensive state. Their body is slightly tense. Their mind is scanning for problems. They hesitate more. They second-guess themselves. And when something small goes wrong, because something always does, it confirms what they already believed. See? I knew it. Now imagine someone else, same environment, same challenges, but with a different internal starting point. They wake up and think, "I'll figure it out. Today might surprise me. I'm improving even if it's slow." That doesn't mean their day is perfect, it won't be. But their mind is now scanning for solutions instead of problems. They take action a little faster. They recover from setbacks a little easier. They interpret situations differently. And over time, those small differences start stacking. That's the part most people miss. It's not about controlling every outcome. It's about influencing how you show up to each moment. And how you show up determines what you notice, what you ignore, and what you decide to do next. So when people say, "Your thoughts create your reality," they're not talking about instant manifestation. They're talking about this, the quiet, invisible shift that changes everything over time. So how do you actually apply this in a way that creates real change? Not by forcing yourself to be positive all the time, not by ignoring your emotions, and definitely not by pretending everything is fine when it's not. Real transformation starts with awareness. You have to notice the patterns running in the background of your mind, the thoughts you repeat without questioning, the assumptions you carry into every situation, the quiet beliefs that shape how you see yourself. Most people never stop to observe this. They just react. Thought after thought, day after day, reinforcing the same internal script. So the first step is simple, but not easy. Slow down and pay attention. What do you tell yourself when things don't go your way? What do you expect before something even begins? What story are you constantly repeating about your life? Once you see it, you can start to interrupt it, not by replacing it with something unrealistic, but by introducing something slightly different, something that creates space. Instead of "nothing ever works for me," try "maybe I haven't found the right way yet." Instead of "I'm not ready," try "I'm learning as I go." These shifts may seem small, but they change how your mind processes reality. And from there, you align your actions. You don't wait to feel perfect. You act while still feeling uncertain. You move, even if it's slow. Because consistency matters more than intensity. Small actions, repeated daily, begin to reinforce a new identity, And once that identity starts to solidify, your behavior follows naturally. That's how change becomes real. Not overnight, but undeniably. There's another layer to this that most people completely overlook, and it might be the most important one: your emotional state. Because it's not just what you think that shapes your life, it's what you consistently feel. You can repeat positive thoughts all day long, but if your body is still operating from anxiety, fear, or doubt, there's a disconnect, and your body always wins that argument. Your emotional state is what anchors your thoughts into something real. It's what gives them weight. This is why someone can say, "Everything is going to work out," while still feeling tense, uncertain, and overwhelmed. And deep down, they don't believe it, not because they're weak, but because their emotional patterns haven't changed yet. Emotions are learned through repetition, just like thoughts. If you've spent years feeling stressed, reacting quickly, expecting problems, your body becomes familiar with that state. It becomes your baseline. And anything outside of that can feel unnatural, even uncomfortable. So when you try to shift your mindset, you're not just changing words in your head, you're challenging an entire emotional pattern. And that takes time. This is where patience becomes essential. Not passive waiting, but conscious consistency. You begin to create moments where you intentionally slow down, breathe, and allow yourself to feel something different, even if it's subtle, even if it only lasts a few seconds. Because over time, those small emotional shifts start to recondition your baseline. And once your baseline changes, everything else starts to follow. At this point, it's important to address something directly, because this is where most people get misled. The law of attraction is not about magically attracting things into your life just because you thought about them hard enough. It's not about the universe selectively delivering outcomes based on your wishes, and believing that it works this way can actually keep you stuck, because it removes responsibility from the one place it actually belongs: you. Real change doesn't happen because something external decides to shift in your favor. It happens because you start showing up differently. You start seeing differently. You start choosing differently. And over time, those differences compound into something that feels almost unreal. Not because it's magic, but because most people never stay consistent long enough to experience it. The idea of manifestation becomes dangerous when it turns into passive waiting. When people stop taking action and start hoping things will align on their own. That's not transformation. That's avoidance. What actually happens is much more grounded. When you focus your mind consistently on a direction, you begin to notice opportunities that were always there, but invisible to you before. You interpret situations in a more constructive way. You respond instead of reacting. You move forward instead of staying stuck. And those shifts create results. Not instantly, not perfectly, but reliably. So instead of asking, "How do I attract what I want?" a better question is, "Am I becoming someone who would recognize and act on it if it appeared?" Because that's where everything changes. If you slow down for a moment and really look at your life, you might start to notice a pattern, not just in what happens to you, but in how you respond to it. The same types of challenges, the same emotional reactions, the same doubts showing up in different situations, wearing different faces. And after a while, it stops feeling like coincidence and starts feeling like a loop. That's because in many ways it is. Your external life often mirrors your internal patterns more than you realize. Not in a perfect one-to-one way, but in tendencies, in directions. In the kind of situations you allow, avoid, or unconsciously recreate. If you constantly expect disappointment, you become more sensitive to it. You notice it faster. You hold on to it longer. And without realizing, you start making decisions that align with that expectation. You might pull back too soon. You might not take a chance. You might settle for less than you deserve, simply because it feels familiar. And familiarity is powerful. It creates comfort even when that comfort is limiting. So the question isn't just whether your thoughts influence your life. They do. The deeper question is, are you willing to let go of the version of yourself that keeps recreating the same patterns? Because change is not only about building something new, it's also about releasing what no longer serves you. even when it feels like part of who you are. And that's the part most people avoid, not because they don't want a better life, but because they don't realize how attached they are to the current one. At the end of all this, the law of attraction is not really about attracting anything. It's about awareness. Awareness of what you repeatedly think, awareness of what you consistently feel, and awareness of how those patterns quietly shape the way you move through your life, even when you're not paying attention. Because whether you realize it or not, you are always reinforcing something. Every thought you entertain, every emotion you hold onto, every reaction you justify, they are all pointing your life in a direction. And the truth is, most people don't notice this until years have passed and they find themselves in a life that feels familiar, predictable, and quietly disappointing. Not because they didn't want more, but because they never became aware of what they were consistently feeding within themselves. So the real question isn't, is the law of attraction real? The real question is, what version of myself am I reinforcing every single day? Because change doesn't happen in one big dramatic moment. It happens in small, almost invisible shifts, in the way you speak to yourself when things fall apart, in the way you choose to respond instead of react, in the way you keep moving forward, even when nothing feels certain yet. And over time, those shifts begin to reshape you, not instantly, not perfectly, but undeniably. So if there's one thing to take from this, let it be this. You don't need to control everything around you, but you do need to become aware of what's happening within you. Because the moment that changes, your life doesn't magically transform overnight, but it finally starts moving in a different direction. And that is where everything begins.